Hello and welcome to the Menopause Demystified masterclass. And I created this masterclass to help women to understand what's happening with their body as they move through the perimenopause and menopause transition. I have so many women who ask me questions about different symptoms, what's happening, how they're feeling, not sure whether or not it's got anything to do with menopause or something else is going on. So I decided to create this Menopause Demystified masterclass just to give you a bit of information. I've created it hopefully to make it pretty easy to understand, and I believe that when you've got more knowledge, then you'll be able to make the decisions based on what works for you as to how you're going to thrive in menopause. And yes, it is possible to thrive in menopause. This doesn't have to be the worst time of your life. It is a time of change and transformation, but as I'm going to show in this masterclass, there is so much that you can do when you understand what is happening. And just before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the Barralong people of the Yugambeh Nation on which I live and work. And I recognise and respect First Nations culture as the oldest continual culture on the planet. I honour the diversity of these cultures and all of the elders and knowledge holders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge and welcome any other Indigenous people who might be watching this recording right now. So just a little bit of housekeeping. There is a guidebook for this masterclass, and you'll find the link somewhere on this page underneath the video, and you can either download that and save it to your computer and fill it out online, or print it out. And it's just going to ask you to think a little bit more about what's going on for you, take a few notes about some of the things that I'm sharing in this masterclass. Now, also just a disclaimer, the information that I share with you in this workshop is general in nature and shouldn't be considered to be specific health advice. I'm also not going to be discussing the specifics of the best type of hormone therapy to be taking in this masterclass. That's the type of information you need to be speaking to a doctor who specializes in menopause about, because they will consider what's going on for you, your health history, and make the decision with you as to what is the right options for you. So have you ever wondered why menopause seems so different for every woman? Well, you're in the right place if that's something that you've kind of been thinking about, because in this masterclass, what you're going to learn is what's actually happening with your hormones, why symptoms vary so much, how your genetics play a role, and how you can take control of your menopause journey. So let's just get started with just understanding a little bit about what's actually happening inside of your body. Now, many women are experiencing various different symptoms, and we know that, if we look at this broad spectrum of women, about 20% of women have no symptoms whatsoever besides their period stopping. Another 20% of women are severely impacted by their symptoms, and it actually affects their quality of life. And then the other 60% of women, which is the vast majority, yes, they have symptoms, but these symptoms are not affecting their quality of life. They're just a little bit, we wish they weren't there. And, many of us really didn't learn about menopause in school. So then all of a sudden we start getting these symptoms, and most of us know about hot flushes, but many women don't understand the role that hot flushes have with their ability to sleep properly, what's going on with mood swings, and then that weight that just seems to come from nowhere, just kind of plonks and doesn't move, joint and body pain. These are very, very common symptoms, but I'm not going to call them normal symptoms. They're common, but they're not normal. And just know you're not alone. Millions of women feel this way. They feel confused. They're frustrated and out of control during this time. I felt that way as well. But the key to getting through this is really understanding, well, I believe, is understanding what's happening with your body. When you can understand that, as I said, you can make different choices. But, I mentioned that this was my story as well, particularly the joint pain and the weight. They were two big things. Now, I've been a naturopath now for nearly 20 years, and I've been working in women's health, and I kind of thought, I knew what was going to happen when I got to that certain age when menopause kind of came upon me. But I didn't know anything. I now realize that there was so much I didn't know. And I can remember one day being on my knees on my lounge room floor in tears, wondering what the hell is going on. My moods were erratic. I was in so much pain. I just couldn't sleep at night. I'd go to bed and my body was aching and I wasn't sleeping very much. I was only sleeping a couple of hours a night due to the amount of pain that I was in. So then I was waking up tired and stressed, and the weight was just coming on. You know, I'm a naturopath. I know about eating well, and I thought I had a pretty good diet. I mean, yes, there was those indiscretions every so often. Hey, I'm human, but I followed a keto paleo style of eating and living. But and in the past, if I wanted to lose weight, I'd just do the keto diet. The weight would go off, and that would be fine. It wasn't working for me anymore. I tried the keto diet. Not only couldn't I stick to it, the weight just wasn't shifting. So I was feeling really, really confused. I was frustrated. I was looking around at other women and thinking, well, what's going on with them? What's happening to them? And I started to speak to some older women who are older than me, and ask them about their menopause transition. And, some would say, oh, no, my period just stopped and that was it. Some mentioned hot flushes, but no one was really telling me that there was this really big, this type of issues that I was having. So it's like, well, what's going on? Is there something else going on for me? And I was trying everything, to get rid of the pain. I was on anti-inflammatories. I was doing acupuncture. I was seeing a chiropractor. I was doing everything I possibly could to get out of the pain, and nothing really was shifting. And I thought, and I was frustrated because here I was, a health professional, and I didn't understand what was going on. And then one day I remember, I think I was reading an article, and I was reading an article about joint pain associated with menopause. And I was like, aha, this is it. Something is going on here. And as I did a little bit more investigation, the pieces kind of started to fall into place, and I started to understand what was going on. So, and I kind of worked out what was causing the pain, and then I had to work out how to fix that. But the weight was still not shifting. And I continued to look for answers for that, because when I spoke to older women, and I said, well, what was it? Are you on a vegetarian diet? What are you on this diet? Are you on this diet? And there was no commonality between these women. So it didn't mean that I had to do more research, and I did. And I did find what the key to it was. And I'll share that with you at the end. In the meantime, I just want to share with you that menopause is a time of transition. It's also an opportunity. And if we think of the butterfly, or the caterpillar and the butterfly, it's like the caterpillar kind of goes in the cocoon, goes into complete mush before it rebuilds itself into the butterfly. Now, if we come along and we see a cocoon and we kind of think, oh, we're going to help this butterfly, get out as it's struggling, and we cut the cocoon open, what actually happens is the wings don't develop. So the actual struggle to get out of the cocoon is how the wings develop. And if we come along and cut the cocoon to make it easier for the butterfly to get out, it will die because its wings aren't properly developed. And this is how I think of menopause. It's like we go into this cocoon and we completely turn to mush, and then we struggle. And it's the struggle that gives us our strength. It's the struggle that gives us our wisdom. It's the struggle that gives us our wings so that we can fly. Yes, while menopause is challenging, on the other side of that transition is someone who really understands her body, understands what she needs, and she's ready to really embrace the next chapter of her life. So like the butterfly, we've got to go through this transformation. And this is an opportunity for us to really look at where we are in our life, how we've been treating our body, because many of us have really not been treating our bodies very, very well. And that's not our fault. There's many things, we have many conflicting things that are, vying for our attention. And, it's easier to have foods that aren't necessarily the best for us because it's quick. We've got responsibilities, we've got jobs, we've got families, we've got parents. Everyone's pulling at us in all different directions. But it's when we understand the role that all of this is playing in how you move through your menopause transition, it means then that you can look at the areas of your life that you need to be focusing on more. But I want to go back a little bit before menopause, and because most women don't even understand what their monthly cycle is about. So this image here gives us a little bit of an understanding of what is going on with your monthly cycle. If you have what would be called a normal cycle, and many women don't have a normal cycle, but the red line is the estrogen flow. So it's very low at the beginning of the cycle, which is the first day of your bleed. Middle of the cycle, when you ovulate, it kind of comes up. Then it goes down. There's a little bit more of a bump in the second half of the cycle, and then it comes off again. But then we look at progesterone. It is low all the way through the first half of the cycle. And then after ovulation, estrogen starts to come up. And the reason being is when we release the egg actually produces the progesterone. So it's what we call the ovum. It produces the progesterone. So now we've got progesterone coming up because progesterone will support that egg. Now, if it gets fertilized, and so a sperm comes along, fertilizes it, now we actually have, we've got an embryo, then progesterone continues to go up and continues to go up for the first 3 months of your pregnancy. If you don't fall pregnant, then that egg isn't fertilized. So what happens is it dies off, and now progesterone levels come down. And we also do have testosterone, which is relatively stable all the way through the month, except the middle of the month when we ovulate, there is an increase. And that's because now we've got an egg, there's an increase in sex drive, because our body is always, whether or not you consciously want this or not, trying to help you fall pregnant. That's what a monthly cycle is all about. So that's what happens in a normal cycle before you get into your perimenopause transition. So now let's look at what happens as things start to change. So as things start to change, so what we're looking at here, where we've got the up and down red lines, that kind of is indicating all of your monthly cycles. So that's kind of a very condensed version of that previous slide that I showed you. But what you can see now, as we come into the perimenopause stage, is now we've got estrogen kind of, which is the dotted line going, it's actually going up higher, and then it's coming down, it's going up, and it's going down, and it's coming up. This is one of the reasons why blood tests are very, very inaccurate when it comes to determining whether or not you are in perimenopause or not, because your hormones can change daily. So you can get a blood test done today and it might say, oh, your hormones are normal. You can get a blood test done tomorrow and it would say, oh, no, your hormones are high or they're low. So they are coming up and down, up and down. And with the progesterone, there is a bit of a drop. Now, symptoms occur when there is a difference, a big difference between estrogen and progesterone. I'm just going to go back a slide. So if you experience PMS, so what happens when you experience PMS, and this is happening right at the very end, when we're into week 4 of your cycle, it will be because estrogen levels are a lot higher than progesterone levels. So we kind of need to keep them in a relative balance. And when estrogen is too high for progesterone, that gap is where you get PMS symptoms. So now, if we come and look at this slide, the same thing is happening because you're not ovulating every single month. You're not releasing an egg every month. Some months you will, some months you won't. So the months you don't, your progesterone levels are actually going to be lower. And that means you've got a bigger gap between estrogen and progesterone. And this is where the symptoms occur, in that gap. So as estrogen's kind of going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down, but progesterone is coming down, we're going to get these symptoms. And then once you're post-menopause, then what you find is progesterone basically levels off completely really low, because you're no longer releasing any eggs. You don't need the progesterone to support an egg, to support a pregnancy, so it just levels itself out. And estrogen itself drops down. It doesn't completely disappear, but it's a lot lower, and it does tend to level itself out. So that was all about the hormones, but it's not just about the shifting hormones. Your brain is playing a really big part in this, because it's actually rewiring. As your hormones are shifting, your brain is rewiring. So I just want to quickly go through what happens with the brain, our ovaries, and our adrenal glands, and why it's really important to understand this. So during your reproductive years, the ovaries are speaking to the brain, and the brain speaking backwards and forwards. So I just want to make note that hormones are messengers. So basically, they send messages to different organs in the body and tell them what to do. So the ovaries produce some estrogen, sends a message up to the brain, and the brain says, okay, fine, yes, I've got that. Go down and sends a message back, release an egg. It's time to release an egg. And then the egg releases and some progesterone comes out, and the brain goes, okay, fine, we've got progesterone. We're going to keep this egg going until it gets fertilized. And then if it does, the brain goes, okay, keep putting out more progesterone. If it doesn't get fertilized, the brain says, okay, drop off the progesterone, and we're going to shed the lining, which is your period. So this communication goes on backwards and forwards between the ovaries and the brain, and it's part of the brain called the hypothalamus. So and pituitary gland. So the pituitary gland is the master gland that basically, it's like the orchestra. It controls all the different hormones that are going on. So during your reproductive years, we call that the HPO axis, hypothalamus pituitary ovary axis. Now, when we don't have as many eggs anymore, and the ovaries are starting to not produce as much estrogen, the conversation is still going on. The brain's still sending a message down to the ovaries, but the ovaries aren't necessarily getting the message. So it's not sending a message back to say, hey, yes, I heard you. And the brain just keeps sending down these messages, and the ovaries aren't responding. And then sometimes what happens, all of a sudden, like the ovaries wake up and go, oh my God, I've got all this information that's come from the brain. I haven't told it. And so I'm going to just release all this estrogen. And that's when the estrogen levels go up. And then it drops back down again. So, the body and the brain is very, very clever. It knows that there is a shutdown coming, or a lowering of reproduction. It knows that that's coming. It's just part of our evolution, that as humans, that we will actually as humans are one of the few animals that don't continue to be reproductive into our older years. So what the brain does and what the body does is really, really, it's special. What it does, once these, it's not getting all the messages it wants from the ovaries, the brain goes, okay, I actually have a backup supply of hormones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the adrenal glands. Now, our adrenal glands have the ability to produce hormones, reproductive hormones. So the brain now starts going on, the ovaries aren't answering. I'm going to start talking to the adrenal glands. And look, it's a rewiring that happens, and it can take a few years for this to actually happen. And in the meantime, you're experiencing symptoms like hot flushes, night sweats, and that's as the brain adjusts to having less estrogen. Also the mood swings and the brain fogs, because this is all the communication that the brain is changing. It's rewiring itself. It's amazing what the brain can do. It can actually rewire. And now, because we've got the brain's talking more to the adrenal glands, which is now what we call the HPA axis, so hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. The brain starts talking to the adrenal glands and says to the adrenal glands, well, okay, ovaries aren't doing what they used to do, so now adrenal glands, you need to pick up the production of these reproductive hormones. Now, we don't need as much reproductive hormone, estrogen and progesterone and testosterone, when we no longer have an egg supply, because we're not trying to keep that egg alive and get it fertilized and everything, but we do need enough hormone for a quality of life, because we do know that there are hormone receptors, estrogen receptors, in various parts of our body, our brain, our bones, our heart, our muscles, our fat cells. So we know that there are estrogen receptors, particularly estrogen receptors. There's also progesterone receptors as well in different parts of the body. So the body does need to continue to make some hormone. It just doesn't need to be making the same amount of hormone as what it was making when you were producing an egg every month. But one of the issues is, and why women struggle so much at this time of life, is because many of us living, the lives that we do, very, very busy lives, is that we're adrenally stressed. Our adrenals are overworked, and our body, the adrenal glands are making lots and lots of stress hormones, so cortisol primarily. And sometimes there's just not enough resources left over to be making the other hormones, to be making the reproductive hormones, because the body's always going to make the stress hormones first. It's got to be a priority, because that's what keeps you alive. That's what keeps you moving. It's not a priority to be able to have enough estrogen, enough progesterone. That just has you feeling good. The body wants to stay alive, and so it's going to focus on those pathways rather than having you feeling and looking good. So this means that we need to be looking after our adrenal glands. We need to be looking at what is going on and why our adrenal glands are not coping so much with this change, which is a natural change that women will all go through. Every woman goes through this. Now, just before, I'm going to go into that a little bit more, but I just want to go through, there are different stages. And because this doesn't happen overnight, this can actually happen, could take 10 to 12, 13 years for you from the time you start in perimenopause, the start of the change of the hormone shifts, to when you go through menopause into post-menopause. So I'm going to go through the key transition stages that women will go through. And, we start with right at the very beginning of perimenopause is when the cycle starts to change. So hormones start to change, as I showed you in that diagram. So you might be having some, your periods might start to shift. You might get a little bit of hot flushing. Weight might start to change. And then we move into, more into perimenopause, which is our early stage of our menopause transition. And this is when the cycle starts to shift. You might have, really short cycles. You might have really long cycles. You might have heavier bleeding. You might not be ovulating every month. You might get soreness in the breast, and you get more and more symptoms. And then as we get closer to our the end of the transition, the menopause transition, this is where you can have really heavy bleeds, and you can bleed for a long time. And then there's no period for ages, and some symptoms will actually start to get worse. And then when you haven't had a period for 12 months, now you're deemed to be, that's deemed to be menopause. So menopause itself is kind of like one day. It's one day 12 months after your final period. You don't know your final period is your final period until afterwards. So, the medical profession has decided on 12 months, and that is mainly for contraceptive purposes. So, they recommend that you continue to do some form of contraception in that time when you're not having a period, because you don't. Sometimes you may ovulate. You can go 3 or 4 months, and then all of a sudden you can have a period. You can go 11 months, and then you will have a period. It's like there was one final egg, there was one final surge, and we know so many women who kind of have that midlife baby because, thought everything was over, and there's one final egg that, comes out, and there, wow, 9 months later we have a baby. So that's what they use, that 12 months for contraceptive purposes. Once you haven't had a period for 12 months, that's menopause, then you're postmenopausal. And Postmenopausal, your hormones have come down and they do tend to regulate themselves at a lower level, and symptoms quite often start to really settle down and don't have as many symptoms. And if there is more symptoms going on, there's generally another cause. So we've got to be, and I'll talk about this in a minute, what else do we need to be looking at beyond menopause? So these are the stages of menopause, but I just want to look at some of the progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone and what they do, because it's not just about falling pregnant, having babies. These hormones have specific roles in the body, and as those levels drop, it means that sometimes we need to be looking at other ways of supporting our body. So if we look at estrogen and kind of think of it like the knight in shining armor, it's like the protector. It regulates your insulin, it regulates your metabolism, bone health, and brain function, also cardiac function. So it protects all of these cells in or estrogen receptors in all of the cells of these different parts of the body. So it is very much a protector. And as your levels come down, that's when you might start to notice different symptoms. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong. We do want the hormones to come down, but what I kind of the way I kind of explain it is, it's a bit like there's been a curtain up, and when we pull the curtain back, because the hormone is now lowered, now we see what's really going on. Because for many women, things like insulin resistance, that's because of poor diet choices over the years. Metabolism that's not working properly. Once again, poor dietary choices, stress, all of this, bone health, not enough exercise. So we start to see, basically, it's a bit of a report card. How have you been treating your body? And, and being honest with yourself and saying, well, what is it that I could be doing to actually change this? And this is also, you can start to notice as estrogen comes down, but you start to store fat around the belly. But that's also due to higher cortisol levels, which is the stress hormone. So when we've got our cortisol levels up, we store fat around the belly. And there's estrogen receptors in that fat, which is why it's really hard to move it, because the body wants a bit more estrogen, and we've got some estrogen stored in the fat. So that's where we kind of get into this tough, weight that won't shift. Progesterone is a calming hormone, so it helps with sleep, helps us getting a good night's sleep. It helps regulate our mood and anxiety. So as that hormone comes down, that's when we have trouble sleeping. You may wake up, feeling really anxious with your heart palpitations going on. You might get more irritable. It also impacts our gut and our digestion, and can actually cause inflammation going on. Now, testosterone, as I said, we do have testosterone, but when our levels drop, that's what we start to notice is a loss of muscle strength, motivation and libido, all related to our lower testosterone levels, and our energy levels can kind of start to come down as well. And also that's another reason we can actually put weight on, and we don't have enough muscle. So all of these things, when you understand all those three hormones, then you can kind of understand why your body is changing and why your mind is changing and you feel different, because there's different messages going out to the body from these hormones, and the hormone levels are lower, so we got lesser messages going out. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong, but it does mean we have, we've now got the opportunity to actually kind of step up and say, well, hang on, what can I do to protect myself? But it's not just about these three hormones. There are other hormones we need to be considering, and it's really important that we don't just blame everything, every symptom that you have on menopause. Oh, it's just menopause. And be very careful of any doctor who just says, oh yeah, that's just menopause, you've just got to put up with it, because there could be something else going on. And quite often, menopause is blamed for many other different things that are going on. So the other hormones we need to be considering, as well as what's going on with our reproductive hormones, starting with ghrelin and leptin. Now, ghrelin and leptin are our appetite suppressor and regulating hormones. So when they're out of balance, we will be hungry all of the time. We won't get the signals to stop eating, and we want to keep eating. And these are balanced up when we sleep. So sleep is really important to have a really good balance between ghrelin and leptin. And melatonin is our sleep hormone. And melatonin helps us get to sleep. And then when melatonin levels drop down, we wake up again. And melatonin works with cortisol. And so when cortisol, which is our stress hormone, is high, melatonin is low. And then when cortisol drops down, then melatonin comes up high. Unfortunately, for many women, cortisol remains high, particularly in the second half of the day, which means we're not getting enough melatonin, so we have trouble sleeping. And then thyroid controls your rate of metabolism and keeps your energy up, and also helps to manage your weight. Insulin is another hormone. So insulin is released by the pancreas. And I'll just give you a really quick overview of what happens with insulin. So when we eat glucose, any type of glucose, it comes into the body, and then we've got in our cell, we've got like gates in our cell, which when they get opened, the glucose can go in and gives us energy. Now, what opens those gates is insulin. So when the brain tells the pancreas that there's some glucose coming through, so the pancreas releases some insulin, which goes and opens up all the gates, and then the glucose that goes in when the cell is full, the gates get closed, and any extra glucose that hasn't been put into a cell to be used for energy goes over to the liver and is converted to fat. So insulin converts that to fat. That's what's happening in the normal process. But what happens for many women, and we get insulin resistance. And what happens is that the body insulin stops responding. So rather than opening up the cells to put the glucose into the cell to give us energy, it doesn't respond. It doesn't open up the gates. All it does is it just pushes everything to the liver and turns everything to fat. So everything you're eating is being turned to fat, and you don't have enough energy. So this is why it's really important that we manage our insulin, and in particular insulin resistance. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that further on. And I mentioned cortisol, and cortisol is really, really important because this is all about our stress. And because stress is one of the biggest disruptor of all of these hormones, our reproductive hormones and all of these other hormones as well. So I want to just get into stress a little bit more. Cortisol, as I said, is the stress hormone that gets released by our adrenal glands when the body sees that it's in stress. And when your body is relying on the adrenal glands to be managing the reproductive hormones as well as the stress hormones, this is kind of where we kind of get this imbalance going on, and our body is in a constant stress state. So all it's doing is producing cortisol, and there's not enough resources to be producing our reproductive hormones. So, and most people just think, well, stress is just like the argument I have with someone at work or my husband or something like that. So it's more of emotional stress, but there's many different things that cause stress in the body. We have physical stress, and this is not getting enough sleep. It's over exercising, and this is a big one. I've seen this a lot in women, where women exercise too much. They think, oh, I've just got to exercise more and more and more to lose weight, and then they go, well, I'm not losing any weight, so I'm going to exercise even more. And that actually is really stressful on the body. Exercise is a stress on the body. The body can cope with a normal amount of exercise, or the right type of exercise for what your body requires, or the right amount of exercise, and that's determined by your genetics. But when you're exercising too much, your body is in a constant stress state. So now your body is physically stressed. Also, not eating the right foods and not getting the right nutrients, or processed food, sugar, alcohol is a massive stress on the body. Skipping meals when your body needs food, because once again, determined by your genetics, will be, how often you need to be eating, having meals, whether or not they should be big meals, small meals, and whatever. And then there's also what we call endocrine disruptors or environmental toxins. These are all a stress on the body as well. So there's lots of different things that stress the body. And, it doesn't really matter where that stress comes from. The body responds the same way. It raises cortisol and it changes the physiology. It changes the way your body functions. And when you continually do that, that's when we start to get different symptoms. Now, these are just some of the symptoms that are associated with stress, and have a look at them. Many of them are also what we call menopause symptoms. So we're seeing this link between the stress, which actually causes an imbalance in our hormones, which now creates symptoms. Now, if we can manage the stress and bring some of the stress down in some areas, no one can live a completely stress-free life, but there's things you can do that you've got control of that you can do to bring your stress down. So as you look at these symptoms, you probably look at them and go, wow, I've got joint pain, I'm not sleeping properly, I've got bloating, all of this. This is what happens. The body reacts to the high cortisol levels, and cortisol is just trying to protect your body, but it's basically it's shutting down parts of your body. It shuts down your digestion. It shuts down your immunity when you're in high stress, because what your body needs to do is it needs to get away from the threat. And when it's trying to get away from the threat, because we've got it's the ancient brain, it thinks it's going to get eaten by a tiger or a bear or something. So you don't need to be sitting down to a 3-course meal if there's some type of threat coming along. So your digestive system shuts down. So when you're in stress all the time, now you're going to get issues around the digestion and the bloating and all these gut problems. And our immune system also is lowered when we're in a highly stressed situation, because once again, we don't need to be worrying about whether or not we're going to be able to survive the latest virus when we're trying to get away from the immediate threat. So cortisol is about getting away from that immediate threat. But unfortunately, we're living in a world where the primitive part of our brain thinks we're under immediate threat all of the time, with all of the notifications that come through, phones that ding and watches that buzz and all of that. It's just constant bombardment. So that, primitive brain wasn't developed for all this technology, for all the stuff that we have got going on. So it's on high alert all the time, and it's pushing out that cortisol. And this is what's causing a lot of, the symptoms that you're experiencing is due to high levels of stress. And if we can manage that, then we can start to notice a difference. So some of the stress affects the body in many different ways, but some of the key ways, and what I wanted to highlight here, is the hormonal imbalances, the insulin resistance, which I've already spoken about, inflammation, which is your joint pain, the gut health, and all of that, and then your thyroid issues. When we talk about inflammation, weight gain, and thyroid in this next section. So now that we understand that stress is playing a role, let's have a look at, I want to start with inflammation, because many people don't understand inflammation very well. Let's start with inflammation or what is inflammation. So inflammation is actually a natural process that happens in the body. So, if you go and you say, twist your ankle. So you're running along and you twist your ankle. And so what happens is it swells up, it gets red, it gets sore, and we can't move it. Quite often people say, well, just ice it and elevate it and it'll be right. Not necessarily so, but it could still take a while to fix. But what's happening there is tissues have been damaged. The brain's recognized tissues has been damaged. So what it does, it sends these chemicals down to the brain, specific cells. It sends it down there, down to the ankle. And so now we get a whole pile of swelling because we've got more fluid, and the fluid is there to kind of hold the foot still so we don't move it. It's hot because we need the heat to actually repair the cells. and it's stiff because we've got all this extra fluid sitting around it, and we've got all these chemicals running around repairing all of the tissues. And then what we want to do is get back on it and walk as quickly as possible. So we slap some ice on it to get rid of the heat, and we start moving it. And that's when we can cause more damage, or it can just take longer to actually heal because the body wants that particular joint to stay still, and we keep moving it. Now, that is acute inflammation. So most people know about that. But what's happening during this time of life is the chronic inflammation. And this is the ongoing pain, joint pain, body pain, and things like deep bone pain. And this is due to the fact that our estrogen levels have come down. Estrogen is a natural anti-inflammatory. So as your estrogen levels come down, if there's underlying inflammation, we will start to see it. Now, this inflammation generally is caused by two things: stress and your dietary choices, your food choices. So stress and food choices are the primary drivers of inflammation in the body. So when we address them, then we start to notice that inflammation comes down. Now, yes, you can take anti-inflammatories. That's going to work in the short term, but it's not going to give you long-term relief of the pain unless you address the stress and the food. And, you know, people say, but I'm eating a healthy diet. And I was too, because this was me. This was my biggest symptom, was just the pain. And I was eating a healthy diet too for the majority of the time, but I wasn't eating the right food for me and based on my genetics, because genetically I needed to be eating more of a more vegetables. Because I was eating keto, I wasn't eating as many vegetables. I was very much protein based, animal protein based, and which meant I wasn't eating as many vegetables. And in my body, too much animal-based protein was actually inflammatory for my body, and that's due to my genetic makeup. And when I dropped down the animal proteins, I still have some, but not as much, and increased the plant food to the vegetables and the fruits and things like that, the pain went. Because I started eating the foods that my body required based on my genes, my genetic blueprint. So it is important to know that inflammation is the body's natural healing process, but when we're in chronic inflammation, it means the body is now out of balance because it's continually in inflammation. But inflammation doesn't just cause pain, it also causes weight gain. And so when we look at what's going on with the weight, there's a few things we need to be looking at with that, and that is our stress levels, because I said cortisol stores more fat. So the more stressed we are, the more fat we're going to be storing. Insulin resistance, which I've spoken about, when we're insulin resistant, and because estrogens come down, what we're going to do is we're going to be storing more fat. We've got estrogen receptors sitting in the fat, so the body doesn't want to release the fat. Our metabolism naturally slows down as we age, so we have trouble burning the fat, and the inflammation makes it harder to lose that weight because the impact it has on insulin, the impact it has on cortisol, and also with inflammation, we're actually holding a lot more fluid and we bloat and we kind of feel heavier. So can you see, like, it's not just one thing? I'm hoping you can see that they're all these things are just kind of, they're all very linked together. And it's not just about because our estrogen levels have dropped or our progesterone levels or our testosterone levels. There's other things going on as well. So one thing I just want to really make a point here, particularly with weight, it's not at this time of life, it's not about calories. Now, counting calories, it's even more stressful. So don't focus on how many calories in and how many calories out. We've got to be addressing what's going on, and underneath that, we've got to be addressing the stress, we've got to be addressing the inflammation, and we've got to be addressing the insulin resistance. So when we do that, so it's working on those hormones that's going to help to bring everything back into balance. And the other thing we need to be aware of is the thyroid, low thyroid function. And this is very, very common for various reasons, stress being one of them, inflammation being another one, insulin resistance. So it's all kind of connected. But thyroid basically is your metabolism regulator, and it controls your energy, your weight, your digestion, and even your brain function. So as your reproductive hormones decline, we can start to find that the thyroid slows down, and generally this is because of the high cortisol levels, because of the chronic stress. So we've lost the protection of estrogen and progesterone, and now the stress is actually coming out, and we're seeing that it's impacting our thyroid. And many women have issues with low thyroid function. And even if, you know, quite a few are diagnosed with autoimmune, so Hashimoto's and things like that, but there's many more not diagnosed with Hashimoto's who do have low thyroid function. And this low thyroid function can also be a cause of weight gain, even though you're eating well. It can also be a cause of brain fog and forgetfulness and feeling cold when others aren't. So when you've got an issue with your thyroid, you know, you can, rather than hot flushes, you could be having cold flushes. Dry skin, brittle nails, hair thinning, slow digestion, bloating. So you see a lot of those symptoms are similar to symptoms that we associate with menopause, and also similar to those symptoms that I showed you when it comes to stress. So we have to be looking at beyond menopause and making sure that we're looking at, you know, getting thyroid function tests done, looking at your stress levels. For me, I generally start with where's your stress, where's your main stress? Because if we can look at that, if we can get that back, you know, and if it's the food you're eating, the type of exercise you're doing, how often you're exercising, if we can kind of get that back in alignment, then if we need to be investigating thyroid and other things, we can do that. But by changing the foundations, by improving the foundations, we're automatically going to be improving thyroid function. We're going to be taking the pressure off the adrenal glands. We're going to be sleeping better. We're going to be bringing all of our hormones back into balance. So it's like getting the foundations right. And when we do that, whatever's left over, then we know where to focus. So, you know, we've been through a lot of the different challenges, and I've spoken about symptoms and all of that, but it's not, I don't want you to think, oh my God, this is just too much for me. There are solutions. And as I said, we do need to be looking at the foundation. So I have what I call the 5 pillars to thriving in menopause. And that is making sure you're eating the right food for your body, doing the right exercise for your body, reducing your exposure to environmental toxins, reducing your stress, which includes getting a good night's sleep, and changing your mindset. And mindset's really important. I mean, we look, all those others are more physical, but our mindset plays a really big role, because if you believe that menopause is going to be the worst time of your life, it will be. But if you can see it as an opportunity for you to understand your body better, to be more connected with your body, and to start making changes that support your body, then you're going to have such a different time of your menopause transition. So my invitation to you is for you to see this as a time of opportunity. So these are general. These are the 5 general pillars to thriving in menopause. But I've mentioned a couple of times genetics and the role that genetics play in all of this. And, and kind of answered that question I had right back at the beginning. Why do some women seem to go through this time of life with relative ease and others struggle? And I now know that answer lies within understanding your genetic blueprint, because that's what I found. So I had to go and do a lot of, did a lot of research, tried a lot of things. And then when I understood my genetic blueprint and started to live in alignment with the way my body was designed, everything changed. And when it worked for me, then I went, okay, I've got to share this with other women. And I've had hundreds of women over the last few years come through my program and experience exactly the same thing very, very quickly. Their body changed, their weight dropped, their symptoms go away, it all changed. So when I talk about genes, your genes they're kind of like, as I said, it's a blueprint, but it's important at this time of life to understand your genes, because your genes will determine how fast or slow your hormones will decline. It's why some women can have, massive changes. Now, I said before, 20% of women have no issues at all, 20 have really, really severe issues, and 60% don't. So there's a difference in hormones in those women. Some women are more sensitive. Some genetic types are more sensitive to hormones. And that's why they can't take hormone treatments, because when they take them, their symptoms get worse, or they get new symptoms. So some people are more sensitive to hormones. So we need to be aware of that. That's genetics as well. It also determines, your genes determine whether or not you will put on weight at this time of life. Not every woman puts on weight when they come through their menopause transition. Some actually lose weight, and that's based on your genetics. Also, inflammation, mood swings, all of it are based on your genetics. But it's really important to, rather than just say, oh, well, that's in my genes, there's nothing I can do about it, just know that your genes don't dictate your destiny. You can actually influence your genes. You can change what we call the way your genes express. So whether or not a gene is turned on or it's turned off is determined by external factors. And this is what we call epigenetics. So epigenetics means above the genes. And when we can understand that, when we can understand what we can do to influence our genes, we can then create a program that works for you. And this is, it's why generic programs don't work. When you say no one should eat carbs. Well, actually, some people need carbs. Everyone should be eating 5 meals a day. Well, that's not true, because some genetic types are actually, some are great on 5 meals a day. Others are actually okay on 2 meals a day. And if you give them 5 meals a day, they're going to put on a lot of weight. Some women, it's like, oh, we've got to just eat more protein. Well, more protein, what does that mean? For some women, some genetic types, they need a higher level of animal-based protein than other women who, if their genetic type puts them into tendency to be more insulin resistant and more prone to things like type 2 diabetes, we don't want them to be eating a lot of animal protein. We need to reduce that, because animal protein creates an insulin response. So we don't want more insulin storing more fat. So we need to understand that everyone is different, and that's why these general diets don't work. Everyone can't be on the same diet. And that's what I found when I was asking women, in the past, I was asking them, what are you eating? And what are you eating? They're all eating different things, because they all had different genetic blueprints. So when you understand your genetic type, it becomes really easy to understand what it is your body requires, the type of food your body requires, the movement your body requires, how often, the timing, all of that. And when you know that, that's how you can thrive in this stage of life and beyond. It's really about knowing what's right for your body. And whilst this is something that I teach women, and I'll tell you in a minute how you can learn more about this, it's actually being very intuitive. And, unfortunately, we have lost that connection between, our intuition and our body. But this is what I find is when women kind of understand their genetic blueprint and we start to implement changes based on that, they kind of go, this just feels right. All the time, I couldn't understand why everything was a struggle, but now it just feels easy. And even though we've been taught everyone must do this and everyone must do that, that's not true. We can't be generic anymore. We need to get personalized. We need to understand that every woman is different and every woman's experience is going to be different. So whatever plan we put in place must be based on a woman's genetics, their health history, their preferences. We've got to take all of that into account. And when we can do that, then you can create a lifestyle that supports you and you can thrive in menopause and beyond. So you might want to know how you can find out a little bit more about your genetic type. So I do actually have a free workshop coming up shortly. And in that free workshop, I go through the 6 different genetic health types, help you identify the ideal food, exercise, and lifestyle choices based on your genetic type, show you how you can reduce your symptoms, regain your energy, drop that extra weight, and create the right solutions that are tailored for you. Make sure that you register for the upcoming Secret to Thriving in Menopause Without HRT workshop to learn more about how you can understand your genetic blueprint and create the life that you want as you thrive in menopause. So either scan the code here on the screen or just visit bit.ly/Thrive Menopause. So bit.ly/Thrive Menopause. So just as I finish up today, I really want to thank you for your time, for watching and learning and listening to what is going on with your body. I really invite you to see this time of life as a transition, as a time for opportunity, a time for you to kind of do a bit of an assessment, on an honest assessment on how you have been looking after your body for the past maybe 20, 30 years. Even if you're really honest and say, well, hey, I haven't been looking after myself that greatly for the last few years because I've been doing so much for everybody else, it's not too late. It's not too late, because this time, this transition time, the time when you become the caterpillar, you're the caterpillar that's going into mush, what comes out at the other side, that's up to you. You can create whatever it is you want. You have the ability to now take control of your health. Your hormones are not giving you that additional support, that additional protection. It's now up to you. You need to be making the right decisions for you. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in the upcoming Secret to Thriving in Menopause workshop. Bye for now.